I need to get better.
Good morning. Welcome to an edition of Badass Marketing. I am joined by my co-host, Angela Dunn, the LinkedIn Badass. Angela, how are you this morning?
I'm good today. I'm feeling more optimistic than I have this whole year.
Really? Why is that?
Um, a number of reasons. I'm really trimming my business down and simplifying it a great deal. And that makes me really happy.
Yeah, I hear you. We've obviously been on the same path and, trying to focus and, specialize, all that kind of fun stuff. So let me ask you a question. I think it's been a little over a month since I sent you down the GPT chat rabbit hole. What's going on with that? Tell me about your experience with that so far.
It's been more than a month.
Has it? It feels
It
like just
has.
yesterday.
I know, but I actually think it was like December
Okay.
when,
Yeah, it could be. Yeah.
so it's been a while, but um, I've learned quite a few things. You know, I remember trying to um, program Fortran and, the whole Gigo, garbage in, garbage out
Yeah.
thing. And that
Which
applies to
really applies to Chat GPT.
it,
Yeah.
it does. So it's really, it takes a great deal of experimentation and that, but I have had some fun with it. I have had some great fun, really just trying to put together some materials around what does branding mean to attorneys, and letting it just spit out a bunch of stuff and give me a whole bunch of ideas to run with. And that's really, it sounds a little generic ish. I did post something from Chat GPT. I changed it a little bit.
Hmm.
That post didn't do very well. But one of the things that I have been more successful is I've gone through this learning curve on trying to figure out how to use it and use it effectively in my business. Is I rewrote somebody's about section for them.
Hmm.
So I took her old about section, I took the about page from her website and the transcript from an interview that I did with her, threw it all into Chat GPT and said,
Like a giant
do
blender.
these. um, could have been a contender. I put it in the blender.
Yeah, we're
Um,
making margaritas in marketing, but yeah, okay, go ahead.
but 2,600 characters, LinkedIn about section, target market is, entry level business people, the whole 9 yards, for her. And I said a bulleted list of her top entry level services, some personal, 3 sentences of personalization, and it was quite amazing. Now I had it do the regenerate thing 3 times,
Hmm.
and the middle one was the winner by far. I changed it, of course, but it's just so much easier for me to have something to work with than to sit down and look at a blank page when I'm writing somebody else's about section.
Hmm.
Once I can see something, then my head starts turning and I'm like, oh, not that, but this. And, that's close, but here's a tweak. And so I was really amazed. And I'm currently using it to put together somebody's newsletter.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a similar experience. If you put some sort of generic prompt in, you'll get a generic response, and it'll be, um, you know, probably not interesting. But if you really sort of take the time to feed it something, and it will give you back some amazing stuff. I mean, the thing that I'm using it for is, I'm writing content, I'm producing a lot of content, and like I'm sort of like pushing content. So I wouldn't say I'm not, focused, but I'm like the creative part of just generating volume sometimes gets compromised. So one of the things that I've been doing is I'll write something and I'm like, that's just a boring title. So I'll ask it for 10 alternative titles. And usually buried somewhere in that 10 is either a really genuinely good title or the nuggets of a good title. So I can put in I'll have written something about AI and healthcare, and it's, and the title is, how to do this. And it's like, geez, that's as, uninteresting as you could come by. But generating 10 alternative titles really like, oh wow, that just sounds so much more exciting, and it really gives it a little bit of a panache to it, something like that. So I'm using it for things like that, where creating alternative titles. Um, Again, it's about presenting it with unique content. One of the things, we have a client that is in the tequila and mezcal business. So what we're doing is we're taking some of the product descriptions that are provided to us by the brands, which are generic and which everybody just simply cuts and pastes and puts on their websites, and we're feeding them through Chat GPT, and we're getting some interesting sort of takes on the product descriptions, which is, as you said, sort of a starting point for us to sort of come up with something, a unique spin on, a product description that, is everywhere out in the market, and yet no one is using something unique. So for us, that we love it, we think it's great. I think I called you almost immediately the day that like it went down, and I'm like, I have to upgrade because I can't live without this. And yes, I have. So, it's just amazing. Like seriously, and maybe it has been 3 months, because like I can't imagine not using it at this point.
Yeah, it's become very useful. Headlines headlines are a slippery thing. You really have to have some presence of mind, and you have to be very fresh to write something that's spicy enough that really attracts
Mm.
somebody's attention. So I think if you can farm that out a little bit to Chat GPT and get a couple of choices and hybridize it, it makes that process a lot easier.
The interesting thing is I put something into Chat GPT the other day, looking for it, and it spit something back to me, and it was a description of a location that I knew very well. And, and again, I was just like, I just need something, I didn't want to spend a lot of time. So I put in the request and I made the prompt, and, it was just specific enough that, it didn't generate anything generic. But what it did do, it was completely wrong. It was absolutely 100% wrong. Um, what it had done was it had picked up some of the information from my previous prompts and carried it over, right?
Oh
But so what
dear.
had happened was, you know, it's a learning tool, so it's going to go back to what you're doing. The problem was
Right.
I've moved on to a different project. I'm talking about something completely different, but it's still reverting back to my earlier prompts. So it was using information from my earlier prompts. However, I had changed subjects, and therefore
Yes.
the output, it's so I was like, oh my God, this is not even close. You know what I mean? And so that is
Wow.
the danger, I think, of using a tool like this and relying on it, is assuming that what it's going to spit out is accurate, because it isn't necessarily. And I got a really big reminder when when it spit out this response. I was like, wow, that's not even related to what I'm talking about, because it had picked up some of my previous prompts and used some of that. I understand that from a data learning perspective why it did it, but I don't know. I guess I would prompt it to tell it, this is a brand new topic. Don't refer to past prompts. And that like I have to sort of clear the slate for it, just to make sure that it doesn't, it's not basing it on some of my earlier prompts. But that was an interesting learning experience for me, because I've been using it and just like pumping stuff out.
Yes.
And then I'm like, this is so wrong. This isn't even close to right.
That is so interesting. And, like I said before, it's like it really does take thought and parameters to get something out of it that isn't garbage. So yes, it still takes somebody with a brain
Or
and
me,
some
either one.
and some presence of mind, but yes, you're right, it's so interesting. One of the things that I like about it though is that you can ask it to do it in a different tone or for a different audience, and that can really spark some ideas. And I probably wouldn't say it that way, but wow, is that interesting, and maybe I'll go in this direction instead. But yeah, because I just had a conversation yesterday with a gentleman who learned Japanese from a woman, and he did a business presentation two Japanese businessmen, and they teased him to no end for years after that
Oh
because
my
he
God, this is a
spoke
Nell story,
like
right?
a woman. Yes. And so having things said in a different tone is a different perspective.
Hmm.
And sometimes that's really good for us to look at things from another side.
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting things is I always combine this with Grammarly, right? So, and one of the parameters of Grammarly is you have those types of options of like, tone. Is this professional? Is this personal? Is this friendly? What is this? So one of the nice things is that, once I get, and develop whatever I'm looking at, from a content perspective, then I run it through Grammarly. And then like, if I want a more professional tone, then I'll set Grammarly, to be expert or to be business, so that I ensure that it does that. It picks up the tone.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, I
When,
mean, I'm all about tools. It's like,
yes,
it's cool because it really, I'm amazed because I mean the amount of stuff that we're able to produce now is generally increased. And what I have found is that the Chat GPT is just a great brainstorming tool. Because, like you said, yesterday I had to write an article and I was like, I don't even know what to talk about today. You know what I mean? So I fed in a couple of questions. It fed me back some responses. I went down a rabbit hole. You know, but as a result, because I had started with nothing, I generally didn't know what to write about yesterday, and I had to produce 2,000 words for a client, and I was sort of like, where do I go today? I've talked about every single thing this client's ever produced, and how do I come up with a new perspective? And through a couple of prompts and through a couple of ideas, like it generated enough ideas where I'm like, all right, I'm going to go down this path. And then as a result, I was able to come up with new content that was, surprisingly not bad. Um, you know, because,
that's,
and that was from coming from a place where like I had no idea 20 minutes earlier what I was going to write about.
I love the idea of using it for the process. That is probably about the best use for Chat GPT ever,
Mhm.
is to really, because blank page syndrome is real for so many people. And just finding that spark that sets things off, that's awesome. I have a friend that used it in a completely different way that I thought was completely genius. She does send out cards, and she had a client that wanted a poem for a 6-year-old boy that had cancer. And
Mhm.
she popped it into Chat GPT, and she asked for it to be a little Dr. Seuss-ish, and little whimsical. And it was so amazing. My mind was completely blown. It was really interesting. And I have another friend that said, my 5-year-old daughter's birthday is coming up, and she loves, pink and sparkly and all kinds of unicorns, blah, blah, blah. And can you write me a song for a guitar with the chords for her birthday?
Mhm.
It's quite amazing what, and he changed some of the chords because he's got his own style, but it gave him the words and a starting place to
Right.
do a customized song for his daughter for her birthday.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's amazing. We're not by any means suggesting you take the output as a final output. Put your personal spin on it. Check it to make sure it's not completely wrong because it could be. But it's a very good starting point for the development of content and promotional material and things like that. So that's what we love about it. I'm going to shift gears and move on to a second tool that you and I have sort of been talking about, and then get your take on it, because this tool, and I'll mention it in a second, but this tool I could do on Chat GPT, except that it means cutting and pasting, right? So what I'm talking about is engage AI, which is a tool that you turned me on to it, right?
Yes, I
Yes,
did.
you did. You turned me on to this, right? Because you are the LinkedIn badass, and therefore this is a tool that allows you to respond and create, you know, responses to folks on LinkedIn. So first of all, before we talk too much about this tool, why is it important to be, responsive and commenting on LinkedIn from the LinkedIn
Oh
bear
my gosh.
perspective?
Oh, there's so many different reasons why being active on the news feed, only if you do it once, you don't have to do it every day like I do, but you should do it a couple times a week. One of my favorite times to do it is if I'm at the grocery store standing in line and I have nothing else to do, you know, do something on LinkedIn to keep the algorithms remembering who you are and that you have content that you're sharing also. It's a big deal. If you're sharing content and you're not participating in the news feed, LinkedIn, your content will be dead in the water. It is not going to get recycled. It is not going to get pushed out. There will be very little engagement. So that's the number one reason. The number two reason is because it just keeps you in the algorithms so that if somebody is doing a search for your main search terms, you're going to show up at the top in a search. If I search for real estate professional, good Lord, I get like 2 million people. But who is that number one spot? That's how the search works.
Hmm.
And also, it's your SSI score. A lot of people don't understand the SSI score, but your participation in the newsfeed greatly jumps your SSI score. And
Okay, but
that
I'm going
has
to stop you for a minute because you're using language that maybe not everyone knows. What's an SSI score?
it is your social selling index on LinkedIn. It is a part of Sales Navigator, and it's easy to find the place where you can do your own SSI score, and just keep track of how you rank on LinkedIn. Now, your ranking on LinkedIn affects many things. Search appearances, the recycling of your content through the news feed, lots of that sort of thing.
And
It's
what
it
drives
just
this? I mean, obviously we're looking to increase it. So what drives this?
your activity on LinkedIn, how many days a week you might log in to LinkedIn, your participation in the news feed, how fleshed out your profile is, if you're missing sections, are you networking on LinkedIn? Are you actually reaching out to people and sending messages? There's lots of different parameters. There's 4 different categories, and each of them is a 25-point scale. And if you're perfect, which nobody is, you'd have a 100-point scale. And the thing that's interesting is LinkedIn estimates that only 3% of the 900 million people on LinkedIn are doing a great job.
No, no, no,
And
no. They've passed a billion, right? I'm sure that they've passed a billion.
I, not that I've heard of yet.
Okay, I thought I read something where they had passed a billion, but
Well, and that's possible. That's
yeah.
possible. I mean, it's 3 people per minute. How can you keep track of that? It's 3 people per minute. Anyway, you can never hit 100, so they're always upping the score,
Hmm.
because of those people who are overachievers. So you can't win this game. They're always upping the ante.
I mean, the thing that that strikes me because so we have a group that you and I have talked about that is doing well, right? But what I can tell you is this is a long game. The the
Yes.
the group has been around for years, and the group sat at 5,000 for years, and like it went up a couple hundred, went down a couple hundred. It just that's where it sat, and then and that was with on my part, occasional engagement, right? It wasn't a focused engagement. It was just sort of like it was the right topic. It generated enough, interest that 5,000 people followed it, but it didn't grow. It just kind of stood there and I'm seriously 2 or 3 years. It just stood at that level. But it was this thing that I had, but I didn't really work on it. That once or twice a week I'd feed it something, right? Um, and then about, I don't know, 6 months, 8 months. Apparently, I can't tell time because I thought Chat GPT was a month ago, but so don't rely on me when it comes to time frames. But somewhere between a year and the last 6 months, we've put a concerted effort into this group, and the group has grown 300%, right? So we're closing in on 20,000. And the way that we've done that is, again, more tools. We use Buffer. We love Buffer as a tool. And we're feeding 10 pieces of relevant content to this audience a day, right? And you know, we did that, and for a while, it didn't move the needle. Like we got a little bit here and there, but 6 months later, the numbers have gone up. And the other day, I posted something, and like 700 people reposted it, which then generated this whole viral thing. And I was like, oh my god, this is how this works. So so my long-winded sort of point here is this is a long game. Right. So
Yes.
if you think that you're going to make these changes and a week later you're expecting to see, well, how come my followers haven't increased? Your expectations are clearly off track.
Yeah. Content is definitely the long game. There is no doubt about that. And it takes not just intention to grow your followers or to participate in the newsfeed or whatever it is that you're doing, but it also takes relevance. It has to be good, relevant, useful content. And
And
that's
so
the same
based on
thing with,
that, right, and based on relevancy and things like that, can you outsource your, comments and participation on LinkedIn to an AI tool?
well, and I think that you can to a certain percent. 50 to 80% of what comes out of engage AI is perfect, but then you need to add something that's even more personal, or to at mention the person's name who made a comment that you liked, or that it is the original author of the article itself. It really is the personalization that moves the needle on that comment and the relevancy of that comment. But most people go to the news feed and their eyes gloss over, and they don't know what to say. What would be a relevant comment for this particular article? And
Hmm.
engage AI will read the whole article and spit out something, um, and then you can go from there and add your own thoughts. But
Right.
it's
And
it's
again,
still eliminating that blank page syndrome.
right. It eliminates the like page syndrome, but be careful because my experience has been not unlike Chat GPT. If you just let it do it without any of your input, it will be generic. You know what I mean? I use the tool, and you know, again, busy, not paying attention, used it to post some responses and forgot to take out the put your name here, prompt. So I posted, dear, put your name here, which is a very personalized approach to marketing. So
Yes.
again, these are starting points. These are definitely tools, but these are not, the final. You need to be paying attention, and you need to sort of add your spin to it.
Yes. They do not give you permission to be lazy.
Yeah.
They're just productivity tools, which still require your input.
Absolutely. So, we think these are great tools. We think they definitely will move the needle, but, remember they're just tools that, there's always, whenever you see a new tool like this, then there's about 300 articles that are going to tell you, oh, this is going to kill content development. This is going to, content marketers are going to be out of business. And we've heard that time and time again, whether it's AI, whether it's, these AI content tools, whether it's the internet, whatever you want, like
Yeah,
these are
over
not
and over
replacing
again.
people, right? These are
Nope.
tools that you can use to leverage that will make you better, but you won't be replaced because again, if you're not paying attention, garbage in, garbage out.
Right. I have a friend that used to teach Sales Navigator. And, when Sales Navigator came out, people thought it was the greatest tool in the world for sales. And it is, it's extremely powerful. But my friend, who has just an incredible sense of humor and he can get away with saying an awful lot of things, he said, a fool with a tool is still a fool. And so you really do have to be careful what it is that you're doing with that tool. There has to be some strategy, some relevance, and just commenting randomly in the news feed is probably not your best bet. There's a couple strategies attached to that that make it much more effective. So people who are prospects or referral partners or influencers in your industry. Those are the people that you want to comment on their content to get to come on the radar of the right people.
And so, one last point before we go, but I know that you have been focusing on Chrome extensions. So, what's your favorite these days?
Well, engage AI is definitely one of my favorite extensions for that, but
And we don't
I
even get paid
love
to keep saying that name, so we're good.
no, I well, and Loom is one of my favorite Chrome extensions, and Auto Text Expander. Oh my, I can't live without it. I mean, most of the
Explain, because
messages.
these are, you're throwing out some names, but you got to put some context around them. So, what does Loom do?
Loom allows you to create a video from the screen that you're on, that I can send to my VA or my person who's building my funnels and working on my CRM. Or if I've just sent a banner to a client and they're like, could you remind me how to change the banner on my profile? I can send them a really quick Loom video that demonstrates how to do that. Adding a clickable link to creator mode. It's just a really fast way. You know, my looms are an average of 2 to 3 minutes. It's really, really quick. To type all that out into an email would be very confusing and not very effective.
Plus,
So,
people, they're passive. They would rather watch a video than to read your email.
yeah, it's personal. It's much more personal. It's much more effective.
And
And
then, what
then
was the
and then
auto expander
auto text
extension?
expander.
Text
Oh
expander,
my
sorry.
God. I use it on LinkedIn and in my emails. So anything that you type over and over and over again should be in auto text expander.
Okay.
So, is it a pain in the butt for you to go and find where your link is to a certain appointment and then put it into an email or a message on LinkedIn? Yes, it is. So if you have a 3-letter code that, for my coffee chat link, all I have to type in is capital C, capital O, capital F, cough.
Hmm.
And that link pops up wherever I'm typing something. I don't have to look for it. When I do speaking engagements, I have a standard description that I use for my mini bio and for the description for the talk itself. Rather than having to find that or recreate it every single time, I have that in Auto Text Expander. Now, welcome messages on LinkedIn, just birthday messages, all kinds of things are in Auto Text Expander. I type a couple of letters and the whole message populates, and then I customize it from there so that it sounds like it's unique every single time.
Well, we appreciate your insights. We are going to continue to focus on bringing you some really exciting tools to make your life better as a marketer. So join us and continue to watch Badass Marketing. We will mention the tools and links below so that you can find the tools, and because some of them we probably forgot to talk about. We mentioned them in passing and moved on to something else. Again, thank you again, Angela. Always the best. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
So fun.
All right.
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.